Hello world. Patricia, O'Connor, and Frida, Reba, Darcy here. Today it is our Sunday drop on the Bonsai balcony. I am Patricia O'Connor. This is Frida, Reba, Darcy, and together we are Simon and Garfunkel. No, we are the Bonsai balcony. And on today's show, on the Bonsai balcony, I am going to just do a couple of little tips. This isn't gonna be a really long show. We've been kind of putting out quite a bit here lately, but it's been moderate. You know, our shows haven't been running much over 30 minutes, and we've been doing quite a few of them. So today's Sunday show, I've just got a couple of little tips, and today is a good time for me to do something. So it's a good time for me to remind everybody of something. It's just like, stop being vague. For instance, as y'all know, I've been a proponent of organic fertilizers. I've put down these little lumps of bottle gold, and I have been recommending those for a couple of years now. And I was given that tip by one of the people that I consider to be my teachers, and then once having done that, I looked around and saw that it was pretty much standard practice for a lot of people. So, but at the same time, at that moment when I was like, okay, so yes, we're feeding our trees a little bit all the time, as opposed to making up a picture of fertilizer and doing it by the calendar every, so many months or times a year or whatever. We're putting down these little lumps, and every time we water in, they get some. So we're fertilizing a little bit all the time, as opposed to more sometimes, right? It's one or the other, and that's what I recognize people as doing. And that was a system that I had been familiar with when I used to grow for yield, when I used to grow things for yield. So I was familiar with the figure out what your maximum dosage would be for a month, and then divide that by 28 and do that every single day. And so they were getting the minimum maximum every single day. And that's how you would grow for yield. And then I saw people doing that to some extent with bonsai, except they weren't maximizing that. They were using something that is a low dose fertilizer to begin with, and they weren't really exceeding any recommended dosage or even leaning on them. They say a dose is 4 little squares in the palm of your hand, and you dole out how many 4x4 square inch areas you have on the surface of your pot, and you put out that many times 4, and then you will have taken care of your micronutrients, and you will have gotten a mycorrhizal relationship started with your trees and the beneficial spores and fungus and stuff. So that's just like almost set it and forget it. I had a thought that was a carryover to my previous experience with this. My previous experience of this is, like I said, was growing for yield. And those plants were perennials, which is to say that they didn't survive the winter, So, the fertilizer was throw it to them, get it while the getting's good, maximize yield, and then everything goes to compost after that. But a couple of times a year during its growth cycle, we would, instead of feeding, which we were always anxious to do because that equaled yield, we would have to know that a couple of times, every so often, I don't remember what my, I would do it periodically, and I would usually set it on the calendar, flush. Instead of mixing fertilizer with my water and watering in a micro dose of fertilizer daily, I would just go for the straight pure water. and water in until you saw it pour out of the bottom, and make double sure you saw it just cover completely. We are flushing out this. We're going to feed this tree. We're going to give it everything it wants, and in the same time, it's going to have some stuff that's left over, and that stuff that's left over is going to start filling the nooks and the crannies. And at first, some microbes are going to love that, but at some point, we're going to have a buildup of stuff. And usually, what we would see is a buildup of salts. Now, I haven't had this problem. Y'all see me throwing down a lot of biogold when I just popped open a new bag, but I'd been out of it for a couple of weeks feeling guilty. So it's like, mom's making sandwiches by the plateful for everybody here. Dig in. But at the same time, that's going to, I just want to put everybody off back on a good foot and get everybody off and going again and all that good stuff. But at the same time, all of the feeding that I would have been doing over these last couple of years may show up in the signs of salt buildup at the root tips, and that can cause problems. I haven't seen that here, but I would suspect that people who don't know the way I should have known, that I'm going to have to flush these pots every so often. Now, it's not going to be as often as I used to when I was growing for yield, because I was using a ridiculous amount of chemical fertilizers at the time. Just using whatever they said was the maximum. Okay, that's what we're doing. So about every 2 months, we're going to go with no fertilizer, and I'm just going to take the water hose and I'm going to turn it on the surface of that pot, and I am going to absolutely flush that soil. And any residue, any residual fertilizer that I was kind of, that was in there, being a little something for us to chew on later, that's going to be gone. What I don't think will be gone is the microbes. I don't think we send all the microbes packing by doing that. It's a little hard to get rid of all of those guys. But then going back with our organic fertilizer would do a lot towards replenishing their numbers. But I don't think I've done a bit yet where I, as many times as I've told people to go with how easy it can be. You can fall down a rabbit hole and get all kind of fertilizers and just be a big proponent of invent a micronutrient and just jump on that soapbox and go nuts. But at the same time, this has always been really easy, and people who've got a bazillion years in horticulture and a bazillion years in bonsai still don't get all wrapped up in stuff. Sometimes they just throw down their biogold and carry on with their life. But I haven't mentioned this yet out of all my teachings and telling you how to do this, because it hasn't come up for me yet. I hadn't thought of it, but when I used to always feed my plants a little bit every day, I knew that every couple of months I was going to have to do what I said and just like turn the water to. And it wouldn't do you any good to put it in the bathtub and soak it or do something ridiculous. That would just move the salts or whatever from down here to up here to wherever when you lifted it back out. It's important that you go to the top and just wet everything down real good and just pour it on the top all over until it's coming out of the bottom all over, like you've never done that before. And you will give up that residual food that they were going to snack on later. That was, you spend money for fertilizer, and at least there's some left over in there after that, but still at the end of the day, there's also that's how toxins form. So flushing every so often is a big thing, and something that will, along with, it is as important as the things you do to keep away other pests. Like twice a year I inoculate my trees. But this isn't a show about systemics, but if you wanted to know, twice a year I give my trees a systemic, and have since I nearly lost a couple to the Black Plague. Now, something else that I've been promoting for a couple of years, and this is a trick that I learned. This is important. Little side note. Whenever I do a bonsai show, I have a couple of people that I learn from. And whenever I say teacher, a lot of times I'm talking about the guys, I'm talking about Ryan at Bonsai Mirai, or I'm talking about Jonas with Bonsai tonight. I hold both of those people in very high regard, and I give them the highest title that I would befit anybody, and that is teacher. Um, get out of get out of my little maples, you big maple. Okay, so but so whenever I do tips and stuff, quite often they come from one of those two guys. This one actually came from a grower out of San Francisco who has an outfit, a business called Bonsai, and he was doing a show where he was talking about how he increased the odds of keeping tiny little trees. Tiny little bonsai trees are hard to keep alive, y'all. They're, my first foray into that, I had a half a dozen of them before I had one live. I kept digging them up in the yard and they kept dying. Okay, fine. But that was also oaks and maples, which I have zero luck with that. Other people's have mediocre luck with that. That wasn't a great way to go about that, trying to get a Mame. These, all of these I grew from seed. But you see, I have these pots. They're in their little pot. Now these are all training pots, and these are bonsai pots, right? But they're in substrate. They're in substrate so they can have escape roots. And as you know, I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big proponent of that. When you do that, here's my little tree in the sun. It's a tiny little tree in a big old huge world, and it gets 100 trillion degrees, and Pat comes through here and slings water, kind of like a comedian slings confetti, and they don't always get enough water, and then the sun scorches them. What helps them survive that is they are in a tray, they're in a brownie tin, and I don't cook. Actually, I do. I could stay alive, but look here. Those roots belong to this guy. Talk about being handsy and not knowing how to keep your fingers to yourself. This was this little tree's hedge against 90-degree days, against this tiny little pot becoming disproportionately hot. And this was this little tree's head against drying out and dying. Now, do you see, we also see that it has a good bit of yellow needles. This is the time of year where we could say, why is my pond's looking yellow? There's a couple of reasons. One, it's fall. And two, there's some third-year needles on here. Three, at some point, these roots will go from the thing that hedged this tree's, it's its little hedge against, it's its little hedge against extinction. It's its little hedge against drying out. It's its little hedge against overheating. But at some point, those roots will stay wet longer than a Japanese black pine roots need to stay wet. When is that sometime going to happen? Well, sometime during fall, whenever our temperatures go a little cooler and our humidity goes a little higher. I don't pour water in this tray to pour water in this tray to feed the trees. I water the trees, and as the water goes through the trees, it wets down this substrate. This substrate stays wet longer than the pots, which is being soaked up by the roots and evaporated by the needles. So that's going to dry out faster. These get to stay wet longer, but whenever the seasons change, this tin would stay wet too long, and all those escape roots will cause my trees to yellow. I first noticed that with this guy. No, this is not a show hen or a Mame, but it is a literati and it's confined, and I do have to worry about this tree and this pot being thin and in direct exposure to the sun, reaching a really high temperature and causing. So it always has a lot of escape roots, and I always allow that. Now, last year, probably around December and stuff, I was holding back on the watering of this tree because of the rain we were having, and I was also noticing that in between waterings, it was staying wet longer because the humidity was just a bazillion and it was raining out there, and even if the pot wasn't in direct rain. It was staying wet longer because the needles weren't passing water because it was so humid. Also, all those escape roots were in this tray, which was staying wetter longer. And I noticed that the tree was starting to yellow, even though I thought I was doing a better job of managing the water in here than what I was seeing on my needles at the time. And the answer came down to those same escape roots that is our hedge against overheating and drying out or the pot getting too hot. They're good for a lot of reasons. But in the winter, whenever all that situation changes, they're the thing that'll make the tree too yellow. And that's a good time to pull those guys up and to start shaving their little bottoms. Now, sort of risky because I mean, well, let's just look at it. It's November. It's a couple of days into November. Okay, I've already done that one. A couple of days into November, second week of November actually. But it could still freak out and get really hot. So if I have a really hot day now, I'm going to have to remember what, Patricia? That today I'm trimming back all of these roots. Anything that has escape roots, those are going to get cut back today, mid-November. As many times as I've sung the praises of having trees. I already looked at this one, yes. Having trees with escape roots. I haven't gotten into and how much they can save your tree. I haven't gone as much into when it's time for them to go. And I was gonna also say and how to go about it, but that's not really nothing. Some of them I don't really want to cut them with a razor or a sharp knife because these are bonsai pots and I don't want to scar up. I don't want to scar up or go scratching up the bottoms of it. So I just use my fingernail and just get my hands dirty and just carve away all the roots that are coming out of those escape holes. And then when I've done that to my satisfaction, I go inside those escape holes and pull out some more and pinch those off, clear the way to make sure they're draining. And then I put everybody back where they belong. So those are an excuse to come out and do things. At the end of the show yesterday, I pulled out a tree. I pulled out this one, and then I pulled out a couple more, and then I pulled out one that was kind of dirty, nasty like it, and said, "I'm gonna bring this in and clean it up tonight. No big deal. I ended up making a pretty cool little tree out of that. Let's look again in the light of day. This guy. I can't touch the screen to make sure it goes focused because I'm holding the tree in camera. I did it with my nose. Did that work? Okay. Anyway, welcome to and look at those roots. I was going on and on about those roots, and that's copper wire, and this is the little tree. It's kind of hard to see the detail because it's so full of buds and foliage and stuff. That's okay. The next move for this one, and this one that I did a couple of weeks ago, the next move for them is to swell up really big and fat and chew on all that fertilizer I just threw down on them, and just prop their feet up like watching the tube eating bonbons, and just get just as fat as a happy snake. That will turn all of these little whimsical moves into fat, dramatic bonsai. And you can already, speaking of fat and dramatic, you can already see that this one had some thickness to it, and you can see that grain, it's already got direction to it where we twisted it. Cool, Daddy. Oh, I couldn't see all that last night in the living room, but I do now. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. our next drop will be midweek when we do our midweek thing. I'm just going to go through here for the rest of the day and shave all the escape roots out of the bottoms of these guys. And that's not too much to do on a Sunday. But what a beautiful day. I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. And here, have a milk bottle. And thank you all so much for watching. I'll put it here. I'll put it here. You don't have to have it. How about that? Look, boy. Sitting in the sky.